The Nobel Prize-winning economist Robert Lucas once said, "When you start to think about the problem of economic development, it's really hard to think about anything else. Billions in poverty is not only profoundly unethical, it's profoundly stupid too. The world has scary medical, environmental, and social problems, and we need all the brain power we can get to solve them. Could this person have become a great medical researcher? Or could this person have become the inventor of a revolutionary new kind of battery? Or could this one have invented a new way to run police forces? The world needs everyone and every mind well-nourished and well-educated. In my lifetime, free markets have lifted 1 billion people from poverty and into a new global middle class. That's 1 billion more brains to work on these problems. So why is free market economics fighting potential attacks from the left and the right? The truth is, free market economics has some pretty big issues. Zvi Grilikus, an economic genius who survived Nazi death camps and ended up teaching at Harvard, showed how free markets leave firms doing way too little research and development, R&D for short. Because R&D is the longest of long-run investments, this gets called a short-term focus problem. Firms do whatever R&D seems profitable to them, measured by its internal rate of return. Faster innovation helps the whole world and can have a social return that's way higher. It sort of looks like the world could easily use 4 times more R&D than actually gets done. Another economist, Robert Solow, won the Nobel Prize for showing how rich countries got rich. Solow showed that more capital and more labor and more resource use explains only about 1/3 of the increase in living standards in the developed world. The other 2/3 is one big technology after another that let the world make more and more valuable things out of not nearly as much more capital and labor and resources, and sometimes out of a lot less capital and labor and resources. Way more than anything else. Ideas made the rich world rich. So 4 times more investment in innovation would have been a very big deal. The level of innovation being what it is might be a very huge market failure. Governments try to fix market failures with laws and taxes and subsidies, but it never really totally works. Patent and copyright laws can increase investors' profits and maybe increase innovation, but a lot of experts say these laws are kind of a mess. Whole areas of medical research may now be minefields of strategic patents any researcher could step on and trigger an explosion of lawsuits. R&D tax credits and subsidies and university R&D grants and government labs can also help too, but political agendas can mess up all these fixes. And there's always the haunting worry that the best form fillers actually get the most money. So these fixes are only partial fixes at best. And all this is only one market failure, a big one, but only one. Public confidence in free markets also took a big hit after the dot-com crash and especially after the 2008 financial crisis. Charles Kindleberger, a famous economic historian, showed that free market economics have been cycling through manias and panics and crashes for centuries, since the first stock markets were set up circa 1600. Kindleberger's cycle goes roughly like this. First, some big new thing, often a hot new technology, happens, and some daring entrepreneurs and investors get very conspicuously very rich. Others looking on want to get rich too, so they invest in the same kinds of things, and more people buy those stocks, pushing their prices up, causing more buying and still higher prices, and the stock market forms bubbles, and bubbles expand. The hot firms rake in money by selling more shares at higher and higher prices until a bolt of rationality hits. Each investor thinks, if I sell first, I can get out before the stock's prices fall. So everybody tries to sell first all at once, and the stock market drops like a heavy object. Then there's a mild recession, as after the dot-com crisis, or there's a huge crisis, as after 1929 or 2008. Eventually, life moves on. Monopolies can form around the maturing technologies, and growth slows until, however many years later, there's another big new thing, and we do it all over again. And we've been doing this over and over and over for centuries. So a second big market failure is cycles of stock market bubbles. Mainstream economics wants people to be rational, but we're not. I don't know if you've noticed, but evolution doesn't select for mathematical optimizers who can do calculus in their heads. People are curious. We're attracted to shiny new things. We poke them and we shake them and we try to see if they might be useful for something. And people are innovative. Monkey see, monkey do. And people are social. There's safety in herds. So every once in a while, there's a bright new technology and a few curious entrepreneurs and investors poke at it and find something useful it can do and get rich. And other people imitate them, and then more people herd into the stock market. Every however many years, it varies, there's a mad flood of investment into a big new technology, and even geniuses can get caught up in this. So oceanic navigation was the big new thing around 1700, and the retired physics professor Isaac Newton lost his shirt in the stock market crash of 1720. He said, "I can calculate the movement of stars, but not the madness of men," after discovering the law of gravity a second time in economics. So one market failure makes free market economies skimp on innovation, and another market failure floods big new technologies with capital every once in a while. Can two market failures add up to something not so totally dumb? Newton lost big in the 1720 crash, but the world got high seas trade. Railroad investors lost big in the stock market crash of 1848, but the world got railways. Radio and electricity investors lost big in the crash of 29, but the world got radio and electricity. IT investors lost big in the 2000 crash, but the world got the internet. A smart mouth might ask, shouldn't we be thanking all the people who lost all their savings pouring money into these world-building innovations? And maybe we should. Countries with free market economics and stock markets and various mixtures of social welfare programs got far richer than feudal or communist or corporatist or fascist countries. Maybe economic selection is favoring countries that stumbled into this combination because it uses one human foible to fix another, or at least help fix it. Economists can be scolds when they see what looks like irrationality. I worry that I've lost friends by panning their bubbly investment strategies, and being right later really didn't help. Maybe there's a method to the madness of crowds, and maybe economists could learn how irrationality can be challenged constructively. Maybe so, but panics and crashes sometimes hurt. The 2008 crisis cost 2 million jobs in the US and 5 million in Europe. And humans moving as irrational herds can be kind of scary. There ought to be a better way than stock market bubbles to boost innovation. And if not, maybe we can at least find a way to blow better bubbles. The 29 crash left radio and electricity and a Great Depression that cost billions of jobs. The IT crash left the internet and a very small recession. The 2008 crash left a lot of empty houses and millions unemployed. So how can we get more bubbles like the IT bubble and fewer bubbles like the real estate bubble? Well, there's a pattern across centuries of bubbles. If banks and other financial institutions lend heavily to bubble investors or even become bubble investors themselves, then the stock market crash becomes a credit crunch too. And it's the credit crunch, not the stock market crash, that kills the businesses and the jobs. A flood of borrowed money went into the roaring 20s stock market and the US real estate bubble that burst in 2008, and big economic crises followed both. Banks totally missed out on the IT bubble, and when it burst in 2000, there was only a mild recession. There's an old proverb in banking: give me a big loan and I'll bring down a bank. Give me a big bank and I'll bring down the world. So keep borrowed money and banks out of anything that looks bubbly. And by the way, maybe fix the inequalities that a mania and panic and crash can leave behind. After the crash of 29, the US imposed a 70%, initially mostly loophole-free estate tax, and inequality fell sharply in one generation. It could work again. And by the way, if one-time innovators mutate into monopolists, maybe think about busting them up. It might be a way to thank all the irrational people who lost so much money getting them rich in the first place. And maybe if the world can blow better bubbles, there'll be more innovation and a bigger global middle class and more brain power. And maybe someday somebody will figure out a less cockeyed way to get tons of financing into new innovation than stock market bubbles. Maybe it could be one of them.